Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
But I'd like to start in Croydon, where a 17-year-old asylum seeker was chased and viciously attacked by a group of people, including women, while up to 20 bystanders did nothing to help.
4 men and 2 women have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following an attack on an asylum seeker at a bus stop in South London on Friday night. The 17-year-old, who's Kurdish-Iranian, was subjected to what detectives say was a savage beating. Simon Jones is at the scene in Croydon now. Simon.
Well, tonight, the 6 people who are being questioned remain in police custody. Officers say the 17-year-old was at this bus stop late on Friday when he was approached by a group of around 8 people. They asked him where he was from. He said he was an asylum seeker, and at that point, the attack began. The 17-year-old, a Kurdish Iranian, was chased from this bus stop down the road. When he fell to the ground, the police say he suffered repeated blows to the head. He was left with a fractured skull and a blood clot on the brain. Kana Valathan heard the screams.
Normally the Friday night they always making noise. So then it sounded very funny. Then look in the window, the group of people beating one person.
Some people tried to intervene, others dialed 999, and the police are treating the attack as a hate crime. The local MP, who's also the housing minister, told me he was appalled.
I described him on Twitter as scum. I think it's a cowardly and a despicable attack, and I hope that we'll find the people responsible and they'll face the full force of our justice system.
Police patrols have been stepped up to try to reassure people that this is not typical for the area, but this is a community in shock.
It's very appalling, really. You expect people to appreciate one another here. This is a diverse society.
Yesterday it was very shocked because I got my 2 daughters, 1 boy, and my wife is coming to school, and it's no good, it's not safe then.
And tonight, one response to what police have condemned as a savage attack. The 17-year-old remains in hospital in a serious but stable condition. Now, neighbours say around 20 onlookers were watching the attack. The police are now calling on them to do the right thing and come forward.
Simon Jones, thank you.
The Daily Mail piles in very heavily on this story this morning. No punches pulled, although, of course, many people would argue that the Daily Mail has played a crucial and relatively shameful role in the demonisation of asylum seekers, the way that for many the phrase has become synonymous with illegal immigration or synonymous with the Breaking Point poster that was so effective in polluting our national conscience shortly before the referendum vote. The idea that Croydon is also, I think, isn't it, where the asylum processing centre is, that was photographed so lavishly by the Daily Mail when a couple of the people turning up seeking refuge, who were purportedly children, looked rather older than the average child, although no older than the bearded 15-year-old who I saw in the snooker on the telly 3 months ago. The role of Croydon in this position may be pertinent. I'm going to say something that I'm saying with increasing frequency at the moment. I don't know whether or not the proximity of that asylum centre would have added to the atmosphere on the streets. I do know this, and I mean this to sound neither boastful nor remarkable. I imagine there's somebody listening to this programme right now that was there. I mean, the nature of the listenership on this radio station and the nature of the reach that is ever extending, the fact that now in London anybody, 1 in 10 of all people pretty much with their radio on at this point are listening to this programme at this point in time, okay? Just under. So the likelihood, if there are sort of 20 people watching and a similar bunch involved in the attack and who knows how many passers-by who didn't actually stop to rubberneck, it is not by any stretch of the imagination unlikely that somebody witnessed this attack who is listening to this programme now. Just put that out there. I want you to talk to me about a world I don't live in. It's a world of young people, really. It's a world of teenagers who you sort of naively imagine are possessed of some sort of idealistic worldview and are a little bit more immune than older people set in their ways, people whose prejudices perhaps have festered for years. And yet, this story makes me wonder whether that's incredibly naive. I mean, if you were growing up in Britain over the last 15 to 20 years, is there a more toxic phrase in your immigration conversation than asylum seeker? I don't know how. Well, I think I do know how, actually. I think it is down to politicians and newspapers who've very deliberately used it as a sort of catch-all term. It should be the one area of immigration that isn't controversial, shouldn't it? Seeking asylum? It should be the one area of immigration that we're proud to wholly and completely endorse. People coming here because they are fleeing rape and murder, torture and bloodshed, war and obliteration. But we've learned, of course, over the course of the last year that it is controversial. You can describe children drowning in the Mediterranean Sea as cockroaches and get rewarded with a radio program on this station. So the idea that the absolute polluting of even words has gone unnoticed is absurd. We can't, I'm afraid, avoid that simple fact. We've played a part, LBC has played a part in the demonisation of asylum seekers. Some would argue a very big part. The way that they are spoken about, the way that they are discussed, maligned, it's a national disgrace. And it means that if these young people, and it's by no means certain, if these young people have taken up the message that asylum seekers deserve to have their heads kicked in, then I think you have to ask where that message came from, don't you? I don't see any other conversation worth having, really. I'm not, I don't think, going to mention Brexit except in the context of that one poster that was endorsed by one Brexit campaigner who, of course, also works for this radio station. But I'm not going to, because I'm sick of it. I know I'm wasting my breath when I say this, but I find the idea that people who argue, people who say, oh, I'm sick of Remainers claiming all Leavers are racist, it's just not true. I've never met anyone, I've never heard anyone say that. I sit here every single time we discuss the issue and say I've got family members, I've got godparents, so my children's godparents, I've got relatives, both blood and familial, who all voted to leave, and they are neither racist nor xenophobic nor stupid nor particularly nasty, nor any of those things. But you're wasting your breath when you say that, because the narrative now has to be a narrative of silencing the opposition. So it becomes, oh yeah, you're not allowed to say what you want anymore without being called a xenophobic racist. You're not a xenophobic racist, but if you voted to leave, then I want to ask you a few questions about stuff like passports and Gibraltar and Scotland and the economy. But not now. For now, I want to talk to you about the demonisation of asylum seekers. When I was a kid, I'm being produced by Chris today, who's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit younger than my usual producer, Caroline. And Chris is 30. That's right, isn't he? He's 30 years old. I'm going to choose my words slightly carefully. And he is aware of the word Joey being used as a pejorative, being used as a 30-year-old. He grew up 15 years after me and was still aware of the word Joey being used as an insult. But until this morning, when we had our little sort of preparatory conversation, until this morning, he didn't know why it was a pejorative. And this would be very much a test of your age. Axel, who's on the show today, is 25. He probably hasn't got a clue what we're talking about. But the children's television programme Blue Peter did some astonishingly brilliant fundraising when I was a kid for people with disabilities, people with profound disabilities. I think it was spina bifida specifically, but one of the characters they used was a gentleman called Joey Deacon, a gentleman possessed of real charm and epic dignity, but he was severely disabled, and most of us hadn't spent much time with disabled people. He was pretty much the first disabled people we'd ever seen, and so his Christian name became an insult. It was something you shouted across the playground. It was something that you used to try to belittle or humiliate a classmate or a playmate. It was the word Joey became an insult, a synonym for other words that we used at the time that I don't think I'm comfortable repeating on the radio at the moment. Not because of political correctness, but because of its counterpoint, basic human decency. And you look at the relative age of the people allegedly involved in this attack. One of the 8 people arrested originally was a 17-year-old girl. And I just wonder, not to make excuses, quite the opposite, but to seek an understanding. I wonder whether asylum seeker has become like that. It's become, because of the newspapers and the posters and the people spouting on the radio, it's just become an acceptable insult for young people to throw around the place at a brown-skinned classmate. The skin colour of the people being investigated for this crime, it's every shade of the colour chart, every shade of the rainbow. But the idea that if you've got a foreign accent, or if you clearly are recently arrived here from somewhere else, as a mum or a dad or a teacher, could you give me a heads up on this? Or indeed as a young person. We do have an astonishing number of young people listening to this programme now, more than any other demographic, actually. Yeah, am I going nuts, or am I right in thinking that this must speak of a kind of toxification of the phrase asylum seeker? Because if you see it on the pages of The Sun, if you hear it come out of your radio with a respectable or once respectable radio station like LBC, if it's coming out of your radio as a pejorative, as an insult, if it's going unchecked everywhere on social media, if you're a young person who is susceptible to that kind of environment, are you left with any choice at all but to consider asylum seeker to be an insult, and therefore asylum seekers to be deserving of abuse and worse? Or, and you might need to be in Croydon to answer me this, or do we just recognise that marauding groups of yobs are kicking people's heads in all the time for a whole variety of reasons, whether it's that you wouldn't give someone a spare cigarette, or you got off with somebody's girlfriend 2 years ago at the roller disco. That was a deliberate joke about my relative understanding of youth culture. I appreciate the roller disco is no longer a go-to appointment for the younger generation. But do you see what I mean? There's a slight danger in this incredibly heightened atmosphere. Just look at Gibraltar for evidence. There's a slight danger that everything is linked to the immigration debate. Everything is linked to racism. And then, of course, the next step is to link everything back to Brexit. So has asylum seeker become a term of abuse for young people? I need you to tell me that from your perspective, because I don't know. It would make perfect sense to me, but if you can answer the question definitively, 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It seems to me almost a no-brainer that it must have done, but I want your evidence. And then we're going to look at the why. Where has this message come from? I've named a few, I think, incontrovertible guilty parties. You can't really argue with any of the people I've cited having played a role in the demonisation of asylum seekers. I think they're proud of it, so there's no controversy in making these suggestions. But how do you stop it? If this kid has fled Iran, where he would have faced awful persecution and abuse, to come here, to this once green and pleasant land where security and harmony and protection used to be our watchwords, used to be our values, and he's got his head kicked in for being an asylum seeker, you have to wonder what the hell we've allowed ourselves to become, don't you? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So make it clear, the ethnicity of the attackers appears to be very multicultural, very mixed. It's not a white crime upon a brown person. It's a British crime, it would appear, upon a foreign person. And I just wonder whether you're as grimly unsurprised by this as I am. It's 10:15. Somewhat embarrassingly, I do not have a clue what the average South London 17-year-old, 18-year-old thinks about, quotes, asylum seekers, end quotes. I know that if they live in Croydon, then right on their doorstep, they've had the controversy surrounding the apparent age of some purportedly child refugees. Those exceptions to the general rule used, of course, to throw the whole shebang back into the sea, but I don't know. So when I read that a group of young people have apparently attacked someone for the crime of being an asylum seeker, I want to know how plausible that is, and indeed how commonplace that attitude might be. Also, of course, given that we haven't had a chance to talk about this together yet, you can come at it, if you can get through, which at the moment will be something of a challenge, from whatever angle you want. Ali is in Slough. Ali, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Thank you for taking the call. What I want to ask, James, is this. Why are people not asking who are the preachers of hate who have been egging on people like this? Who's radicalized these criminals who attempted to murder an innocent teenager because of where he came from or how he spoke? Who are the people that are these tricks? Well, where did they go to school?
I mean, to be fair, hang on a minute. We didn't use the word radicalised, but I don't think I did much else in my introduction except answer those questions. Well, ask those questions and provide you with some answers.
And my question is a rhetorical question: is that where are the experts? Why are they not out now speculating? Where are the diagrams? This is the sort of thing that's going on because 10 days ago, a murderer did something very similar on Westminster Bridge, and the faith, the background, where he'd been, where he might have prayed. These were the questions that were going across the globe, not just in this country. And when a boy is fighting for his life, and you mentioned a couple of the preachers of hate, they are regrettably employed by this channel, by this radio station, but there are dozens of others, many of them not very far from where the tragedy took place on Wednesday 2 weeks ago in the Houses of Parliament, because that's where lots of this hatred started from. Mr. Farage and co. took it on to the next level. But both parties...
This is quite distinct from support for Brexit. I want to make that absolutely clear. You are, of course, on this radio station free to say what you want within reason. I used to have a rule that I didn't allow colleagues to be criticised on this programme, but I've had to rescind that rule for the grounds of democracy and free speech. But you're not blaming this on Brexit voters. You're blaming it very specifically on one Brexit campaigner.
Look, it's broader than Brexit. Brexit's only a year old, James. You know very well, and as do most of the listeners who bother to follow the news in a balanced way. The concept of immigration and targeting immigrants. You mentioned Joey Deacon, similar age to you, so I remember those horrendous things we all used to say.
And we all did it, mate. You don't get a free pass on this one. We were all guilty of that.
No, I don't. Mate, hands up. And you very eloquently pointed out our failings. But look, growing up in the 70s and 80s, racism, mate, I was spat at. I was called everything under the sun. I got into fights at school because of the way I looked. I didn't speak any different to anyone. So I know I've been there, worn that T-shirt, and it's not a nice one to wear. But in the last decade and a half, it's gone to an epic proportion. And my question to all of the listeners out there is, when it comes to a certain kind of criminal, and that's what we call criminals, whether they happen to be from the Muslim faith or any faith or no faith.
Yes.
No faith. Why is it that everybody for a week, 10 days will talk about it? And as Joe Cox's husband so eloquently put it, he said, if Islam is to blame for this murder, then every Yorkshireman is guilty of Joe Cox's death. And to be very frank with you, that was a fantastic summation of it. So in coming back to your questions, these kids have grown up in the last 15 years on a diet of toxic hatred being spewed out by politicians of all stripes and no exceptions. And I don't pin it only on Mr. Farage and co, to be very frank. He is one piece of that jigsaw. And it's a tragedy. And the question I started from, James, was this.
Go on.
Why are people not questioning the ideological basis?
I hear you, and I would again argue that they are. I'm going to share some news with you now, just broken. 5 people have now been charged with this attack over the weekend, which obviously has an immediate impact upon how we can conduct our conversation about this alleged crime and what we can say. So I will reiterate what these questions are, okay? The questions are, have young people in Britain been led to a place where asylum seeker has become a pejorative, has become an insult, has become a negative? So no more reference specifically to any events that unfolded in South London over the weekend. Let me stress that. If you're on hold, if you're waiting to talk to me and your point very directly addresses the crime of this weekend, the alleged crime of this weekend, then I would urge you to surrender your space on the switchboard and free it up for somebody else. So 5 people have been charged with the alleged attack upon a 17-year-old asylum seeker.
Theresa May has urged witnesses to come forward as 5 people have appeared in court charged with violent disorder following a suspected hate crime which left a teenage asylum seeker fighting for his life. The Kurdish-Iranian 17-year-old Reka Ahmed was chased and subjected to what the police call a brutal attack by as many as 30 people. Paul McNamara joins us now live from Croydon in South London. Paul.
Well, clearly this is an awful crime that shocked many people in the community here. But before we give you any more detail on that, let's just give you a quick update on the victim. Remember, a 17-year-old asylum seeker here with no family. We've been told by the police that he's actually recovering well and is expected tomorrow to move out of intensive care and onto a regular ward. Now, more details of this assault have emerged today. This is what we've learned so far.
This is how the residents of Croydon really feel, they say. A far different message than that which was delivered on Friday night, when, according to police, a racially aggravated assault evolved into a mob beating, watched on by many.
Police say just before midnight, a group approached 3 young men at that bus stop. The police were also investigating whether or not the group had been drinking at this pub across the road beforehand. Now, allegedly, the group asked the boys where they were from, and when they discovered they were asylum seekers, that's when the violence started. Apparently, the group split up. One of the young men, Rekha Ahmed, a 17-year-old, ran away up this street, turning right on that corner. And the police say about 50 metres up, that's where the group caught up with him. And very soon, that group swelled to 20 to 30 people.
The boy, a Kurdish Iranian in the UK without any family, was left with a fractured spine, a fractured eye socket and bleeding on the brain. 5 people appeared at Croydon Magistrates Court today in relation to this attack. 20-year-old Darryl Davis and his sister Danielle were both charged with violent disorder and both released on bail. 2 other men released on bail for violent disorder, Barry Potts and Jake Walder. But the 5th, George Walder, is charged with violent disorder and racially aggravated grievous bodily harm. He was remanded in custody. Answering questions at the scene today, it's an attack that's left even the capital's police shocked.
I can't remember the last time I've seen an attack of this nature, particularly a hate crime. This is so rare and so unusual, but this was horrendous.
If there was such a huge crowd and this baying mob, why did it take police so long to start making arrests? Why weren't arrests made that night?
I think it's always difficult. People hear the sirens and they scarper, and when you've got a language barrier in relation to the victims, it's very hard to establish very quickly what's happened.
The borough's bishop has been instrumental in welcoming underage asylum seekers to Croydon. This attack has devastated him.
I can't think that anybody could possibly feel anything except shock and anger at that such a horrible thing could happen to anybody really, but particularly to someone who's come to this country looking for it to be a place of safety and security and finding themselves being attacked and beaten up on the streets. It's a terrible, horrible thing to happen.
Police have now released CCTV pictures of these 2 men they would like to talk to, and they're advising anyone of that large crowd at the scene on Friday night to come forward now before the police catch up with them first.
Now, this is an evolving investigation, and even in the last hour or so, the numbers that have been arrested have changed. So in total so far, 16 people have been arrested. Of those, 7 have been charged. So the 5 that you saw in our report just there, plus 2 others, the youngest of whom is just 17. 7 others remain in custody and 2 have been released with no further action. But with the numbers involved in this crime, those numbers are likely to change. Back to you.
Paul McNamara, thanks very much.
So we're looking at the plausibility of asylum seeker itself having become both a phrase and a status which invites the hatred of the population. And behind that question lies Ali's inquiry as to who might be held responsible for any perceived radicalisation. James is in Croydon itself. James, what would you like to say? Bearing in mind, you heard everything I just said, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, James.
Good man.
Yeah, I was going to talk on it a little bit more, but just my opinion on it is growing up in Croydon, drinking in Croydon, spending my youth in Croydon. I've seen white people have their head kicked in by black people for being white. I've seen Polish people have their heads kicked in by white people for being Polish.
You don't work for the tourist board in Croydon by any chance, do you, James?
No, I know. I've grown up here and I've seen quite the degradation of society that it's become. These kids that may or
I can't. I mean, what's the point, mate? What's the point? Come on. I always boast about how intelligent my callers are. Don't let me down like that. What's the point of me saying don't refer specifically to any crime? I might take this under advisement during the news. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. If you want to just talk to me about how... Because I'm a 45-year-old white middle-class bloke who lives in the middle of London, so to speak, works smack in the middle of London, sees all sorts, but doesn't have a proper insight into the minds, if you will, of young people, perhaps at the lower end of the socio-economic or the educational spectrum. That's what I want help with. Chinzia is in Portsmouth. Chinzia, what would you like to say?
I'm just going to say that my children will not be like that. They will not grow up to hate. Today, at lunchtime, I'm going to go and meet an asylum seeker, Syrian, with her 2 little girls. And I met them last Thursday in the park. They gave my children a muffin. And I started talking to them, found out where they were from. And I thought, I left the park, came home, and then thought, why am I not going back over there? Why am I not striking up a friendship after all the hate that's in the papers? So I did, and we're meeting up today.
That's a lovely story. You restored some of my faith in human nature, although I kind of have a little bit more faith in human nature than the average fella at the moment. That's an absolutely lovely story. What's her life been like since she got here? Do you know? Have you had these conversations yet?
Just a quick one, brief, just to say that she said that people aren't friendly.
They're
and,
not.
Yeah.
So un-British, isn't it?
I know. And I said, no, the silent majority, we are out there.
Oh, well, you've got more faith than I've got.
We want you here. And we, you know, I basically said, can we meet up again? And maybe you teach me Syrian culture, Islamic culture. And her English wasn't fantastic, so I'll teach her a little bit of English.
And it's not really controversial.
I've got 5 cakes in the oven right now to take over there.
Which is nice, and I know what happens now. I mean, if you were having this conversation in a slightly less intelligent environment, someone would start shouting about virtue signalling, or you know what question I have to ask you before I let you go, don't you, Cinzia?
What's that?
How many have you got sleeping in your spare bedroom?
Oh, God. The hate is just awful, and we've got to show that. I think really right now people have got to stand up and
start pushing back.
Yeah, and talk to your neighbours, talk to the people in the park.
You're better than me. You're better than me. I quite embarrassedly, but in no way did I toy with the idea of not admitting it. I confessed last week after the terror attack on Westminster Bridge that the woman on my school run who wears a full face veil, I did feel myself allowing some sort of negative thoughts to bubble up the day. Because the school run was actually happening as the events on Westminster Bridge and at the Houses of Parliament unfolded. So I was watching Twitter to see the news, and then I just felt, I get it. No one's going to sit here and be holier than thou. You can completely understand how people can be tempted to malign a whole population based on ethnicity or colour or clothing or whatever it might be when one of that number does something vile. But it makes as much sense, as Ali reminded us a moment ago, as holding Joe Cox's killer as somehow representative of all Yorkshiremen. Cinzia, thank you. It's 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Not much debate or dispute over who must bear some responsibility for rendering the very status of asylum seeker as something to be derided and despised in this country. We have people on the payroll here who boast about wanting to see these children drown. So it's not a massive surprise that it's become acceptable, if you like, in some circles to speak and behave in this way. But I just wonder how big those circles are. It's 10:30. I apologise if you live in a civilised environment, if you're a decent person and are therefore going to be somewhat shocked by the word I'm about to share with you. But if you've spent any time at all on social media of a political flavour in recent years and months, you'll already be familiar with this word. It almost beggars belief that in the space of a few short years, this country has turned into a place where it's thrown around in common parlance. The LBC Facebook page which I probably shouldn't say that. I don't look at it often enough to be sure. But the last time I looked, which was just before Christmas, it was full of this word. The word is rape-fugee. And the intent behind the coining of that word, I don't know who came up with it, but it wouldn't be a very long list. There'd be one of those websites. The coining of that word is designed very deliberately to make you think, to make me think, that everybody coming here seeking refuge is a rapist. It ties in with Islamophobia. It's why people routinely try to describe Sweden as the rape capital of Europe, because Sweden has a per capita higher immigration rate than anywhere else in the civilized world, and racists, of course, can't deal with that thought. It has to be a disaster, and so they've conflated rapist with refugee, very deliberately. You'll even see the word employed in some environments that, frankly, should know better, but we're hardly in a position to talk anymore, are we? So that is part of the reason why I suspect the word asylum seeker, the words asylum seeker, or the word even refugee, has become so toxified. I want you to talk to me about that's to answer Ali's question, if young people are seeing asylum seekers as worthy of contempt, then Ali asked the question in quite provocative terms. He said, who radicalised them? That's a bit of a no-brainer. I'm, as ever, more interested in how you can hit the reverse gear and move away from these levels of toxification and hatred. But I also want to know how plausible the observation is that it's being turned into and I use the example odd at the beginning, but thank you for saying how effective it's proved in getting to the heart of this issue. When I was a young boy, a gentleman, a severely disabled man called Joey Deacon, was the kind of poster boy for a Blue Peter appeal, fundraising appeal, and his name became synonymous with abuse in the playground. He was severely disabled, and we thought that would be a really good insult. Almost all of us. Anyone rings me up now who was born any time around 1972 and afterwards and says they didn't join in on that. I'd like to say I didn't, and I can't remember joining in on it, but I know what I was like as a kid. There's no way I'd have stood in the corner of the playground delivering a homily on why employing the word Joey as a pejorative was unacceptable behaviour. I waited until I was 32 until I started doing that for a living. It's 10:36. Michelle is in Mitcham. Michelle, what would you like to say?
I stood in the corner of the playground.
Got to turn that radio off, Michelle. Zainab is in Greenford. Zainab, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi there, James. I'm a primary school teacher, and I've got a class of Year 5 children, so they're 9, 10 years old.
Yes.
And yet the word refugee is used as an insult by some of the children. And at first I was really shocked, but since then we sort of had a discussion about it, and a lot of the children didn't actually know what refugee meant.
No, of course not.
They'd heard it in papers, they'd heard it on TV, they'd heard it from their parents.
Yes.
But when we actually discussed what it meant about someone sort of fleeing from their country, we had a really great discussion about it.
Oh, bless
and
you.
it was the children sort of themselves began to sort of question what they'd been heard. And a lot of them said just wonderful, wonderful things about how in Britain we should be welcoming of these people and how we should, welcome people who are fleeing persecution. And that was really heartwarming to see that sort of.
Did you ask the 9 and 10-year-olds who were saying that how many they had sleeping in their spare bedrooms, Zainab? Because if you didn't, I'm afraid you're going to get expelled from the anti-political correctness cult of the United Kingdom.
No, I didn't.
Oh, shame on you. And that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? So that's a crucial age, 9 and 10. I'd say that's when you're up for grabs. The decisions you make of that, it's like the old Robert Frost poem about the path not taken. And if you can get them, if you can shine some light into their lives at that age, then whatever darkness they're deriving from the media or, God forbid, from home, possibly you can not fight against, but you can dilute a little.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to also talk about these things with the children, because if they're hearing those words but don't know what it means, of course it's going to come out and we're going to hear that in the playground. But I think it's just about being very open with these discussions. I've got a class full of children who are from all over the world, and some of them are refugees themselves but don't actually know that. And
are you serious?
Yeah,
of course.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So they're not going to know that, but a lot of them, they see that this country is their home for them, and now they've seen the word refugee being used as almost for people who are aliens who are coming in, not realising that many of them, they're all, the whole class, they're sort of children, grandchildren of immigrants, and some of refugees.
Yes, well, that's why some people, no doubt, will. I'm sort of weaning myself off this corner of Twitter now, but people still wallowing around in there will no doubt seize upon the multiple ethnicities of some of the people arrested in the latest crime as evidence of things not working. And in fact, it's the opposite. I always remember when I was first introduced to Irish racism towards West Indian immigration, I couldn't quite get my head around it because I had that kind of dewy-eyed attitude to the no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. So I'd always presumed that the blacks and the Irish would be on the same team against racism. But it's like being bullied at school. And then if someone arrives the next term and they get bullied, you're going to be over the moon. However decent you try to be, it's someone else is getting a kicking now from the bullies. So you're going to cheer it along. You're going to be all for it. Zainab, that was lovely. What about the phrase asylum seeker? Is that in the vocabulary?
No, not really. It's mainly been sort of refugee and immigrant. That's been the main one.
Well, let's look at the conflation. Here's a selection of front pages. I've retweeted it. I'll do it right now, actually, just to prove we're live. There we go. I've retweeted it from my account. That's at Mr. James O.B. The original tweet is from one of my most assiduous correspondents. And just a selection of front pages from the Mail, the Sun, Just the Mail and the Sun, actually, which is significant because they are by far the two best-selling newspapers in the country. Migrants channel stroll to asylum in Britain. Britain's broken borders. PM, why we must not take 3,000 migrant children. Exodus, 3 million UK workers are now foreign. Europe, the real crisis. 1 million more migrants are on the way. How Blair cynically let in 2 million migrants. Wad a waste. Migrant Mr. Big, the great migrant con. We're stuffed. Anarchy near the UK. Pull the other one, Dave. Surrender on illegal migrants, national handout service, poll chancers, jungle warfare, great migrant swindle, Brits not fair, crushing verdict on open door migration, deadly cost of our open borders, 1.6 million migrants from the EU settle in Britain, betrayal of white pupils, warning on UK Muslim ghettos, migrants smuggled to UK for just £100, Osborne's 3 million migrant bombshell, migrant workers blow to Cameron. And that, as everyone listening to this knows, will be the tip of the iceberg. So really, if young people in Britain are persuaded that migrants or asylum seekers or refugees or all of the above are somehow deserving of contempt and abuse, I'm not sure we get to sit here, really, and wonder why. Michelle's in Mitcham. Michelle, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I just thought that the children are growing up. You know, the racists are out of the, they've crawled out from under their rock, so they're teaching it more overtly.
We can't mention anything about the alleged events in South London this weekend. You get told by me, you get told by the producer, but if you do, then I'm not giving anyone the benefit of the doubt on this. I'm speaking specifically and directly about the general demonisation of both the status and the phrase migrant, refugee, asylum seeker. Andrew is in Chigwell. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Well, I really don't think that anything has changed. If we have a look at our own history, we have a look at back in the 60s when we had the Rivers of Blood speech. If we have a look at the 70s when we had the race riots in the East End, we had the skinheads, we had the National Front. Now we have the migrants coming in. We also have us lot. I'm Jewish. We have the anti-Jewish people.
Didn't we have?
Inbred.
No one's going to dispute that. I mean, throughout the year, you go back to the Huguenots. I mean, everybody took a kicking from the native. In fact, I think the Dutch got blamed for the Great Fire of London, didn't they? Because they were the sort of whipping boy du jour at the time. But you sound a little older than me. I hope that's not an unfair observation.
Yes, I'm 103. I feel that way, but yeah.
I've got that in common with you. But as a 45-year-old, my understanding of the world is changing all the time and growing all the time. But I think that in the 90s and the noughties, we had a period of unprecedented racial harmony in this country.
No, we had a period that anyone who spoke out was demonised and called racist.
Well, that kept them quiet, didn't it? It looked like harmony to me, mate.
It was a suppressed harmony. Everything
it's better than what we've got now.
Well, it's just coming back out to what we had. Nothing has changed. The only thing that we had during the 90s and noughties was the Labour Party pushing everything down, pretending that everything was great. And if anyone spoke out anything about disharmony, it was demonised and it was pushed down.
Well, you mean if anyone was publicly racist, they were demonised? Or publicly, I mean, to use your better example, if people were allowed to be publicly anti-Semitic, they were demonised, and you think that was a bad thing? I'm all for demonisation of demons, mate.
Well, have a look at the 70s with regards to television programmes.
No, I know what the 70s were like. That's why I'm talking specifically about the noughties and the 90s. I think we made very, very real progress. It involved screwing down the lid upon ancient hatreds and bilious bigotry, screwing down the lid and hearing the squeals of the people protesting. You're not allowed to say what you want without being called a racist. All right, say what you want. I hate black people. Well, you're a racist. I mean, that is exactly how it played out. And, I mean, it's a little early to be nostalgic for political correctness, because I'm hoping we can turn back the tide of hatred. But to suggest that you got demonised for being a racist as a bad thing, I mean, who are we going to demonise if not demons?
I think what has actually happened when you suppress people's feelings which were not changed, and the basis was not changed, but it was still there. It's like a pressure cooker.
No, it isn't. I mean, you certainly could have had more conversations openly about why racism was wrong, but those would have involved the sort of conversations we're having now, with lots of people ringing up to tell me why racism isn't wrong. I kind of preferred it, not that they ever did get punished in a material sense. They just felt ashamed when they said out loud things that they thought in their hearts, and that's a good thing. There's things that I've thought in private moments that I'd be ashamed to say out loud, and decent people would be the ones to make me feel ashamed. I'm ashamed of how I felt when I saw that woman in the full face veil on the afternoon of the Westminster terror attacks. I talked about it out loud, and my shame diminished. You might have a point when you say that nasty, hate-filled bigots should have been given more of a voice, but you started off by describing to me the race hate of the 70s and the 80s when they did have more of a voice. There was an astonishing piece by... Is it Leroy Rossignol, the football player? I urge you to Google it. I'll try and dig it out and retweet it from the @Mr. James OB account. Absolutely astonishing. And you know, a kick in the face of people like me who thought that there was massive progress during the periods we've just been discussing. What he endured. I think he speaks particularly about the Nazi salutes at Leeds United and the sort of National Front infiltration at Chelsea. And it's breathtaking. I'll dig it out and let you read it, and then you'll see that there was progress, and now there is regress. And some people are absolutely delighted about it, which is always interesting. Historians of the future may wonder why we didn't notice that expending so much energy on examining the so-called radicalization of Muslim youth, Islamist youth, allowed us to completely miss, or at least take our eye off the ball, of the radicalization of a sort of growing white supremacist strain, which seems to be taking hold in America and elsewhere. Our own island nation is, I think, now too multicoloured, too, thank God, multicultural, to allow that kind of post-Ku Klux Klan nostalgia to take hold, although, of course, a former Grand Master of the Ku Klux Klan has publicly endorsed one of the presenters on this radio station. That was certainly a first for me, in terms of people that you work alongside. And in response to the last caller and the suggestion that nothing's really changed that much, we should not have demonized people for being racist in the 70s and 80s. It's categorically wrong. The whole beauty of what has become known as political correctness was that if people weren't allowed to pollute the national conversation with their bile and hatred, if they did actually feel ashamed of what they said, then you just diminish what gets passed on to the next generation. Just by definition. They might be hearing it at home, but they know when they go outside that what they're hearing at home is unacceptable. It is no longer polite society, or whatever you want to call it, civilized society, no longer admits these sort of Alf Garnett-style attitudes. Now, that'll be next, actually, after the blue passports. They'll be trying to put Alf Garnett on stamps. That will genuinely, well, mark my words, I haven't been wrong about anything yet. That'll be next. Bring back Alf Garnett. That'll be the next campaign. Pounds and ounces, then Alf Garnett. And as Tracy points out, Oprah Winfrey used to have members of the Ku Klux Klan on her show, but nothing ever changed. She stopped doing it because she realised she was just giving them free advertising. That's the problem with inviting people onto Question Time and onto television with their toxic views, is that the views become less toxic the more they're exposed. It's the nature of political correctness, was to say, right, as a society, as a civilization, we've decided that's just not on. You can't go around beating people up verbally because they're gay or black or brown or Jewish or Muslim, because if you were allowed to go on Question Time beating people up verbally, or you're allowed to unveil posters that beat people up pictorially, it's not a huge leap of imagination to imagine other people, generally not from the same sort of class and education of the acceptable face of race hate in this country, people from lower down the socio-economic ladder, people who haven't been to public school, who don't know their way around a chalk stripe suit, they're going to beat people up physically instead of verbally. It's just not even controversial, this. So the process of radicalisation. Henry's in Brighton. No mention, obviously, of alleged events in South London this weekend, but I know I don't need to remind you of that, Henry. What made you pick up the phone?
What made me pick up the phone is what you said about the term rape-fugee.
Yes.
And I want to quote a couple of others. There's libtard is one, which is a combination of the word liberal and retard.
Yes, just the once for that, because again, it's a horrible word, and to see it co-opted in that way is vile. But many people on the LBC Facebook page seem to. I mean, to be fair, some of them can even spell it correctly.
And and there's Ramona too. Is another one.
I think we've got to suck that one up, haven't we?
Well, do we have to suck it up? I wonder. I mean,
it's very different from the other one.
It is very different from the others, but it's part of a general trend. I mean, the run-up. I mean, I will say, I know you've said that this is nothing, there is no sort of tangible connection to Brexit here, but it seems that this has got worse in the run-up.
Let me clarify. Okay, some of the key players in the Brexit movement are personally and profoundly responsible for the decline in British values, for the toxification of race arguments, and for the demonisation of refugees. But you cannot extrapolate from that any suggestion that everybody who voted to leave the European Union is any more disgusted or discomforted by recent events than you are. That's all. So you're welcome to link them.
Generalisation.
Absolutely right. And we're wasting our breath saying that, because people will be sitting there now going, how dare you say that all Brexiteers are racist xenophobes? But you have to remember, Henry, that in any given population, by definition, just under half will be of below average intelligence. We just have to deal with that on a daily basis.
And there is the danger, you see, because these words, all of the words I've mentioned before, are used by people who have a phobia, a fear of others' values.
Yes.
And the question is, why do we tolerate this as individuals?
Well, because we're the good guys. We're the ones that believe in freedom and liberty, and it is, I mean, arguably a decade-long exercise in punching yourself in the face in order to protect what you hold dear. But you know, when Michelle Obama said, "When they go low, we go high," she was kind of answering your question, wasn't she?
Well, yeah, but you see, but the problem that society or people tend to make assumptions. I mean, I'm 65.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm not saying that as some sort of pride thing about being 65. I'm saying it because most people would say, well, as you get older, you get more reactionary. But there you have another stereotype.
Yes, I'm still waiting for that to happen to me as well. I'm 45, and I seem, if anything, to be moving in the other direction.
And that's exactly the same with me. In fact, you know, I've got to the stage now where I literally weep for what is happening in this country at the moment. Really, you know, I find it very distressing and personally upsetting to watch people ripping our society apart verbally, as you said, in terms of images, physically. I find it absolutely repugnant, but it seems to me that we are living more and more in a very reactionary society. I mean, if you look what happened over Gibraltar, for example, and the words that were used by conservative
unbelievable, absolutely. Well, I say unbelievable. That's a redundant word now, isn't it? In 2017,
incredible that we can sit and watch this pass us by without jumping up and down and screaming, "Why are you reacting in such a childish way?"
Well, because I think you've answered your own question. The words are coined, the words that you've mentioned to us, and the word that I mentioned earlier with regard to the conflation of rapist and refugee. The words are coined because it's a tacit admission you can't win the argument. So if I call you the word that begins with lib, then I think I've won. Because I'm literally so stupid that I think insulting you shuts you down. If I had any decent arguments to make, and as a phone-in host, I probably know this better than anyone else in the country, ring me and win an argument with me, or text me and call me I'll use the word once, text me and call me a libtard, and then go away high-fiving yourself for your genius. The other thing that started happening recently is people will, for me personally, people will ring other people on LBC so that they can win an argument with me. I keep hearing my name popping up on other people's programmes so that you can win an argument with me if I'm not there, and you can use Photoshop and things like that to win an argument. Someone's done a picture of my eye infection from the beginning of this year and used Photoshop to make both my eyes look really, really bad. And I mean, genuinely, this sounds so rude, but there is no other explanation. That's a level of thickness, Henry, that I don't think someone like you is ever going to be able to get his head around.
No, I think you're right there. I mean, it is really, really difficult to understand.
You will drive yourself mad trying to find a rational explanation for why anybody would use Photoshop of a radio presenter to win an argument about immigration. But there are people who think that works as an actual meaningful. You're going to think I'm making this up, and I've blocked all the people that do it, so I'm not going to be able to prove it to you. But I got one message on Friday from a fella, I think his name was Real Brian Clough, and I replied in good faith and said, "Oh no, don't worry, this is a Photoshop." And then I looked at his feed, and it was actually part of the troll den rather than.